for the wives that may be wondering what exactly your husbands have been learning in Manhood That Matters, I want to give you just a little bit of taste and glimpse of what they should be learning and see if they're learning this, so you can check this out.
I did the choreography myself. Hey honey, have you gained some weight in your rear end? The dress you wear reminds me of my old girlfriend. And where'd you get those shoes? I think they're pretty lame. Would you stop talking, cause I'm trying to watch the game? If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. I planned a hunting trip next week on your birthday. I didn't ask you, but I knew it'd be okay. Go make some dinner while I watch this fishing show. I taped it over our old wedding video. If you're a man who've done that, a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. Solo, okay. Your cooking is okay, but not like mother makes. The diamond in the ring I bought you is a fake. Your eyes look puffy, dear. Are you feeling ill? Happy anniversary, I bought you a treadmill. If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, that too. These are the things you don't say to your wife. You're a man who doesn't want to get killed with a knife. These are the things you don't say to your wife.
Okay, so not only just teaching them what not to do, of course, we also want to make sure they know what to do. So when Tim Hawkins wrote that, it was about 10 years ago. But he's been married, he's matured, he's been married almost 20 years now, and so he wrote a new one just so that you see that your husband should be learning how to talk to you in a romantic way, and the art of seduction. So here's his new one that I hope your husbands are learning.
It's about to get real, baby. I know what love means to you. The party is through. It's just me and you. Everyone has left our home. Girl, we're finally alone. Wave goodbye to the guests. You know what's next. I understand. We'll light your fire. We've been married 20 years. I know what you want, my dear. I'll go get the vacuum and take it from here. I'll clean up for you like you want me to. You see, turn off all the lights and I'll be alright. Lock the doors for you, sweep the floor for you, and I'll put down the kids so you don't have to. Oh, baby, slip into what you want. Put your baggy sweatpants on, your favorite ones with a Nutella stain down the front. Go watch some Apple TV, Parks and Rec, all Downton Abbey, baby, yeah, like you want to. Gonna turn off all the lights, and I'll be alright. Lock the doors for you, check the bathroom too, and I'll put down the seat so you don't fall through. Baby. Hey, thank you, California. You did amazing. Yeah, remember, I will clean up for you.
That's what the romance is all about, right? Okay. Now let's get serious. So you know that we're on a 10-month journey. We're on a 10-month journey to for Manhood That Matters in leading your families and learning for the men to lead their families in the way that God designed the universe to work. And in each 5 value categories, we're spending 2 months. And so this month, or this section that we're doing now, anybody know what we're on right now?
Yeah.
What value category are we doing right now?
Relational.
Relational. All right. See, we are on the relational values. Anybody know what the first relational value is?
Not about us, it's about God.
All right. It's not about us, it's about God. And here's one that some have trouble with. The roles of husband as played by a man and wife as played by a woman reflect God through authority and submission. Anybody struggle with that one? I've got a few comments. And God sees you as one. Divorce is not part of His design, right? So these were the relational values that hopefully you're looking at. I shudder to even ask how many of you would raise your hand and be willing to be honest and say how many watched all 3 relational value videos. Anybody? Okay, we've got a couple. It's okay. The reason we have those on video is because it's never too late, right? It's a lifetime journey. Let me ask you this question, because we're not, there's so much that we can deal with today that's going to be important, and this is a critical in all of the values. This is critical, and today, what I want to discuss today is especially critical. But let me just ask this question. See if you can come up with this, and I don't expect you to know this answer. You may not even know what I'm looking for, but so just let's guess. What would you think of those relational values, looking at that? What would be the biggest message that we would get from these relational values? What would it turn our attention to and direction to? If you're looking at the relational values, what should we get, the big message from the relational values? Anybody want to take a stab at it? What should it point us to?
God relation with us. Christ's relationship.
You get an A plus. You know what?
Say it again.
The spiritual values. The relational values bring us back to the spiritual values. Why? And look at the spiritual values. Remember, we're designed for intimate fellowship with God. We're designed to be part of His body, the church. And we're designed to love the world in His name. And it's through our relationships, especially in the family. But remember, we talked about, if you were here the last time the ladies were with us, and we talked about that really, it could even be parent-child in the relationship, or even, we talk about pastor-congregation, boss-employee, all these relationships and the way that they work is how this is reflected. And for the body of Christ to work, those relationships have to be working right. Ephesians tells us that Jesus is the head, and that it's through everything that the joints supply, so that each individual part of the body can work. Well, what do you think those joints are? What do you think metaphorically those joints are referring to? It's relationships, right? It's the connections, and you should have seen that in some of the videos that you watched. So these spiritual values is what the relational values reflects and also takes us to. And we talked last time about the fact that what hinders that from happening is that early on in our relationships, we begin to develop an adversarial atmosphere. Now, why is that? And what is, do you remember what we talked about last time, that what we really want to be instead of adversarial? What do we want to be? What in the relationships do we need to become for each other, especially in the husband and wife? Anybody remember? Anybody remember? Oh, good. Allies, right? So how do we become adversarial instead of being allies the way God intended for it to be? We fit together perfectly in order to reflect the glory and image of God. Remember, if you watch the videos, you see how when it says it's not about us, it's about God. What it is about is that through the relationship of the husband and wife and through that authority and submission, we reflect the glory and image of God, and we reflect the relationship between the church and Christ, right? So then what happens? How do we get off on this adversarial thing? You know, another way that we talked about that you could say adversarial is that it's unhealthy conflict. Remember, we talked about all relationships have conflict, but we get into unhealthy conflict. Why? Let me propose 3 areas where we develop this adversarial atmosphere or the unhealthy conflict. First is, remember we talked about the personal issues, which the Bible calls strongholds. Secondly, and by the way, those personal issues come as a result of living outside of the spiritual values. So remember those 3 spiritual values of intimate fellowship with God, part of His body, the church, and loving the world as His name. When we live apart from that and we have other reasons for being alive and we don't get that as our purpose, then we develop these personal issues. It has an effect on us because it's not, we were dying. There's no other reason to be alive except for those 3 things. That's what we're designed to, why He leaves us here. Otherwise, He'd bring us home, right? Pastor David talked about this, I think, Sunday or the Sunday before, that you know, there's, or maybe it was in our 301 class, that, you know, there's only a couple of things that you do here that you can't do in heaven. And one is telling people about Jesus, and the other is sinning. And I don't think we're going to sin in heaven, right? So we're here for these spiritual purposes, and it creates these strongholds when we don't. The other is wrong expectations. In other words, we get married, and if you watch the videos, you saw this, that we have this fantasy Hollywood view that we're going to find our soulmate, right? You don't find your soulmate. You don't go marry your soulmate. You spend 30 or 40 years becoming soulmates, right? And instead, when you have this fantasy expectation, what happens is something we'll talk about another time. Is I'm going to actually be releasing a video in our the Principles Gallery on the website on this relational debt account and how to turn that into a relational savings account. And then finally, it's ignorance of God's design, not understanding what male and female is. Now, why do you suppose that we develop these? Why do you suppose that we go into marriage with that? Because after all, how many of you before you got married got premarital counseling? Anybody get premarital counseling? Well, then what was it, like 6 weeks? Well, shouldn't that have taken care of these then? Shouldn't that have prevented this from happening? No. What is supposed to prevent this from happening? We're going to find out next month when we go into the parental values that that's the essence of parenting, is preparing to not have this happen when we come into it. So, so when we look at this unhealthy conflict and how that's what creates that adversarial roles, it's because we have different. See, I forgot to give the communicate to say to silence your phone. When you know, our brains are different, right? The male-female brain. Now we know that instinctively, right? That we function different, but I'm not talking about just a concept. I'm not talking about just a metaphor that they're different. The male and female brain neurologically and physiologically functions differently. Now this is kind of a fun look at it, but here is a legitimate look at it. Everybody know what the brain's made out of? What do we call it? Gray matter. But did you know it also has white matter? It has both gray matter. And in the areas, the brain areas of intellect, males have a higher percentage of gray matter than do female brains. And female brains have a higher percentage of white matter than male brains. Now, why is that important? Why is that significant? Because in the area of intellect, the gray matter processes in a linear, logical way. And white matter processes, it's really hard to articulate. Even scientifically, when they talk about this, it's hard to articulate because they say that it processes through feeling, but it's not like emotions like anger or sorrow or those kinds of things. The best we could really come to articulate would be what we think of as women's intuition. Everybody know that women's intuition? It's just a sense about which a woman processes in which she can't articulate, explain it in a logical way, and yet is it every bit as legitimate. And then that moves from that sense from the white matter into the gray matter. And for a male, process in the linear. Now also, in the woman's brain, there's a larger percentage of connection between the left and right hemispheres of the brain in the female brain. Scientists don't know why, they just know that this is the case. And in a male brain, there's stronger connection between the front and rear parts of the brain that processes these logical process systems. It's like the CPU when I talk about the intellect. So the significance of that, think about this. When women process anything through their brain, it's difficult for them to understand what they do not feel. And for a man, the way his brain processes, he can't feel what he doesn't understand. Right? And when we try to relate that way and don't understand this, and then you combine all the other things like the fact that we speak a different language and the way we process, then wouldn't you agree that begins to have conflict? That if we do it right with the same values and have the same principles that are governing that, it works together. God designed it that way to fit together perfectly, but if not, can you see how that would create unhealthy conflict? Let me give you an illustration of what I mean by that. Now, you probably heard of the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, talking about how male and female speak a different language. Even every family speaks a different language. But let's look at how that actually comes out in a practical sense. Think about this. If a husband comes home from work and he looks a little down and his wife looks at him and says, "Honey, what's wrong?" He says, "Nothing." Wife comes home, she's looking a bit down, and her husband says, "Honey, what's wrong?" She says, "Nothing." Now, they've said two completely different things. Because when a man says nothing, what he means is, what he's saying is, there's nothing wrong with me that I need to talk to you about. I'm okay. If I need to talk to you about it, I will. Otherwise, leave me alone and I'll take care of myself. When a woman said nothing, what she's saying is, there's nothing wrong with me that I'm going to tell you unless you prove that you love me by dragging it out of me. So when the husband said nothing, what did she hear? She heard, there's nothing wrong with me that I need to tell you unless you prove that you love me by dragging it out of me. So what does she do the rest of the night? She tries to drag it out of him. She's nagging him from his perspective, right? And he's going, "Did you not hear me?" Right? And when she said there's nothing, what did he hear? He heard, "There's nothing wrong with me that I need to talk to you about, so leave me alone and I'll handle it. If I need to talk to you about it, I will." So he said, "Okay." He goes, sits down, starts watching TV, and she goes, "He doesn't love me." Now think about it. That's one word. That's just one word. Multiply that by thousands, and that's just the language. Look at when the brain processes all that. What is the effect that will have in creating this unhealthy conflict if there's not guidelines and design that we both agree on? Remember we talked about last time, it's those value system that's what gets us through that. Let me give you a little bit of a kind of a funny look at when we look at these things, the way that creates it. Let's look a little bit of
Key to a great relationship is
look at how that
control.
might look.
Control is the thread that keeps your relationship together. And we found that being
Think
passive-aggressive is the best way to control your partner. I thought we could do something together today. Maybe go to the beach.
Not interested.
Or we could stay in and watch a movie if the beach doesn't appeal to you. When Amber won't talk to me, she really helps me learn that I did something wrong. Because she won't tell me what I did that was wrong, deep down I just assume that I'm simply wrong for who I am at the core of my being.
When I give JP the cold shoulder, it's encouragement for him to be a better person, because I don't really like who he is.
Oh, thank you for cleaning the kitchen for once.
JP shares so much gratitude with me through his snarky comments, and at the same time he shames me a lot. He is so good at directly communicating his thoughts with me with misdirected shame.
She deserves it.
I've decided I want to write a book. I'm so excited.
You've never written anything before, so you're not going to get picked up by a publisher.
JP's criticisms of my ambitions reminds me that I'm not enough of a person to fulfill my own hopes and dreams.
Yeah, Amber's dreams have no place in our relationship because they threaten my ability to control her.
Oh, I feel so loved when you control me.
Couples who control each other stay together.
I've made it to the gym 3 times this week.
That's really good. I didn't think you'd be able to get yourself to go at all. I use a compliment to slightly disguise my harsh criticism of Amber, and I have lots of it because I don't have any respect for her.
And I don't have any respect for myself either. That's why I'm with JP. We're a perfect match.
Oh, I talked to Drew this morning. He said he and Jillian are going to the Bahamas for a week.
Well, maybe if you made more money, we could go on a trip like that. I have a lot of expectations that JP will never be able to meet. And he deserves the opportunity to feel heard about not living up to my impossible standards.
Amber feels empty inside because of her daddy issues from childhood, and I'd much rather have her hurt me rather than feeling her own hurt. And I think that by putting up with her emotional abuse, eventually I'll be able to rescue her.
You're my knight in shining armor.
No, that may be an exaggerated look, but in a subtle way, isn't that exactly what begins to happen over time? We settle back into these default things because of those personal issues and because of those wrong expectations and because of the ignorance of how it's supposed to work. Because how is it supposed to work? How did God design that to work? In those relational values, what do we learn? It's the second relational value. It's through that authority and submission. We don't like that. Because what is authority and submission? How does biblically that really look? Love and respect, right? It's the love and respect that overcomes, that prevents those things from happening. And not as a response to feeling, because it's not about how we feel, and it's the only way that we can actually override those personal issues, the wrong expectations, and the ignorance that causes that to happen, that creates that over time, that builds up those ways of relating to each other that's not the way God designed for it to be. So love and respect, the Bible says in Ephesians, which is where we get the foundation for how the marriage relationship is supposed to work. Nevertheless, each individual among you is also to love his own wife, even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respect her husband, right? And so, there's
two doctors in the house this morning. So
Emerson Eckert has a great book on this. So listen to what
here
he
on
says about
Tuesday
it.
mornings, and a special guest, Dr. Eckridge, with us. Thank you for joining us, guys. Pleasure.
You bet. This has been fun, and we're getting to that real stuff here. We're going to talk about, Linda, what we debate about every now and then. Women just don't get it. And you say the men just don't.
They don't get it. No, clue in.
Hey, and Barry's in the house, so that ought to help out.
Well, he needs to hear this. So,
Emerson, let's go there. What is it that men aren't getting about women?
Well, that crazy cycle again. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love. One of the things that men don't always understand is that when women move toward the husband, she will confront to connect. But he interprets that she confronts to control.
So when she's nagging or pushing or being
complaining or ventilating or critical, that nurturing nature, she's trying to resolve things, she's trying to reconcile, she's ultimately trying to increase the feelings of love between them. Why wouldn't she? That's who she is. But she delivers that message in a way that feels negative to him. And we were chatting during the break sometimes, we are negative in order to motivate the other person to be positive.
How's that working for you?
So that's why she's nagging all the time.
That's right. But we have to come to that realization, did I marry a good-willed person? Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:33 and 34, the husband is concerned about how to please his wife, and the wife is concerned about how to please her husband. And we have to make a decision, and those men out there listening need to trust that this woman that you married is not uniquely negative or ventilating. She actually sees you as the Christ figure, she's the church figure, and she places her burdens on you, and she sees your strength, and she moves towards you to connect. When she stops, you've got a problem.
Emerson, there's a verse of scripture that says, a contentious wife is like constant dripping. In other words, it's pretty brutal to feel like all I get is pounded in my relationship, in my marriage. The truth is, I don't like it. I don't want to be a part of it. What you're reframing here is you're saying, Tim, she's doing that, and we're not excusing it. That's not what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying she's doing this, though, because she's trying to get you to love her.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. I mean, there are contemptuous women, and I think on the other side, women have to understand that if you are coming at a man with contempt, and some women will say they have contempt for men, but Jesus never had contempt for any human being. So the Christ follower who is showing contempt toward the spirit of another person has to really step back. So there are contemptuous, contentious women who need to be guarded. But I'm addressing the man right now. Not all negativity is the result of a woman being filled with contempt and contention. She's actually trying to communicate the hurt and that fact that it's a compliment to you that she has a need that only you can meet. And so we have to decode that. Did I marry a good-willed person, or did I marry a Jezebel? And, sometimes people are quick to conclude, there was Peter and Judas both denied Jesus. But there's a difference between the spirit of a Judas and the spirit of a Peter. And I say to couples, if you're looking at your spouse as a Judas, when Jesus sees them as a Peter, you're making a huge mistake. And if you're taking snapshots of their behavior rather than seeing the overall movie, you're making a huge mistake. So the challenge always, though, during the crazy cycle moments is to remind ourselves we're allies, not enemies. This is my friend. Even though we're mad at one another and we want to be nasty, I'm not going to view them as a Judas. I'm not going to view her as this contentious, contemptuous woman. And I'm going to trust her heart. So when Sarah, my wife, moves toward me out of a burden and her eyes darken, the face turns sour, the hand on the hip, the scolding finger, the rolling of the eyes, the sigh. And then when estrogen kicks in, the word choice of contempt is right? I mean, it's incredible. But I've got to trust her heart. This is the mother of our children. And she's a good-willed woman, basically concerned about how to please me ultimately, not displease me or show that she's indifferent.
And in a lot of ways, then, what we've got to do is slow this truck, if you will, because it's coming right at us.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's doing is it's ripping and tearing our relationship. If I see her that way, what then do I do as a man to respond to her?
Well, in the initial moment, it may not be easy. Sarah and I get on the crazy cycle every week because she looks at the world through pink, I look at it through blue. We just see the world differently. Sarah says, I have nothing to wear. What she means is she has nothing new. I say, I have nothing to wear. I mean, I have nothing clean. Right? And so that's an innocent illustration, but we look at things through pink and blue, and we're saying things with different meanings. I mean, a woman and a husband were traveling along, and she was just seeking reassurance how he felt about her, and she said, how do you feel about me in the relationship? He said, you're very critical. Well, she was about to jump on him, and then she just read my book, Language of Love and Respect, so she pulled back to clarify what he meant by what he said. And she said, what did you mean by that? He said, well, I've been thinking, with the kids and everything, if you died, I don't know how I would survive. You're very critical to my survival.
Oh.
Whoa. So we have to decode what does my spouse mean by what they're saying? Why is she negatively coming at me? Because I probably have hurt her. I always say, did I say or do something prior to that that felt unloving to Sarah? In the majority of the cases, that can explain it. Why? Because she's a good-willed woman. Now, she may not always see things correctly. I don't see things correctly, but am I going to trust her heart, or am I just going to react to her? I'm sick and tired of this disrespect. Or will I see her as saying, I have a need that only you can meet, and I'm reacting this way because I expect you to decode that.
We're going to come back and talk about what women are not getting about men.
Well, we have Dr. Clinton in the studio with us this morning, and also Dr. Eckridge, and we're talking men and women, love and respect.
We're really looking at the chapter of Ephesians, chapter 5, where Emerson's done a lot of work, and he's mined out some gold here for us. And by the way, Emerson, it's not been without its challenge too. I think people come back and saying, you talk about love and then for women and respect for men. Tell us again, tease out what you mean by respect, and then let's talk about, do women get that?
Right. Well, it's a challenge. In fact, not only does Paul talk about wives putting on respect toward their husbands, but Peter said you can win a disobedient husband through your respectful behavior. 1 Peter 3, 1 and 2. No wife is commanded to agape love her husband. Only husbands are. And it is a powerful
let me stop there with that again. He said, no man is...
No wife is commanded to agape love her husband. Only in the domestic passages are husbands commanded to agape love, and that silence screamed at me. I had the privilege of studying the Bible 30 hours a week for nearly 20 years, and I got into this. I began to realize that is significant. And I'm under divine command to love because I don't think I love as naturally as Sarah. It's within Sarah's nature. And I remember praying, Lord, why have you not commanded Sarah to agape love? And this inaudible voice said, I put it within the nature of a woman to nurture. Women love to love at the level of intimacy. You have to wound a woman at the level of intimacy to get her to stop loving. I'm not going to command her to do what I created her to do because I'm not into redundancy. And the significance of that is powerful. Now, in Titus 2, the older women are to encourage younger women to love their husbands, but that's phileo, not fillet him. Phileo, it's a Philadelphia brotherly love.
Brotherly love.
Yes, and so there is a friendship, and and she used to phileo her children as well. You say to the children, does your mommy love you? Oh, yeah, she loves us a lot. Does she like you? No, we've been bad today. Hey, Harry, yeah, does your wife love you? Oh, yeah. Does she like you? No, not today. And so everybody knows she loves, unless she's been wounded somehow. My dad attempted to strangle my mother to death. And
true story?
True story. Yeah, I mean, I don't make that No, I just thought I'd make that up, But so that trauma was there, and so I know what evil abuse is. I know what these painful things are. So when we talk about respect, we're not talking about respecting evil behavior. We're talking about coming across respectfully as we confront behavior that's unacceptable. Just as a man who is to love unconditionally is not to love her bulimia or anorexia, that misses the point. He loves her in spite of that. He lovingly confronts that. But again, it comes back to this crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts in ways that feels disrespectful to him. Without respect, he ends up reacting in ways that feel unloving to her. So God commands us at the point of our vulnerability. I have to be more guarded, because it's very natural for me to be unloving, especially when I feel disrespected. And it's very natural for Sarah to be disrespectful when she feels unloved. And that's why you and I are not commanded with the same Greek word, because we live by the honor code. Men just instinctively honor one another, because if you diss another man in a certain situation, you could get yourself killed. So we don't go there. Women just naturally do things lovingly. So that crazy cycle is explained again. But again, the foreign idea is this respect thing. So I say to women, have you ever written a card to your husband? Because women are saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, do you know what disrespect is? Oh, yeah, I got that down. But are you talking about putting on a cheerleading outfit, pom-poms? No. But here would be one thing. Have you ever written a love note to your husband they didn't keep? Maybe in Valentine's Day, you had the hearts, the X's and O's, and you came into a study, and there the card was in the waste can. And you said, you threw it away. Well, I read it. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. But I said, beyond your words of love, say it his way, the card he'll keep. And I mentioned again that men will die for their wives. Husband, wife, 3 children in a home. Burglar comes in, murderer says, one of you's got to die, the rest of you I'll let go free. And given that's true, who dies? In the conferences, we always ask that question. Everybody yells out, the man. Okay, he doesn't want to die, but we feel like we are responsible. We don't see it as a right. But the point here is write a note like this. Use your term of endearment, dear Poochie Poo, and say, I was thinking of you today. I was thinking today that you would literally die for me. That's an overwhelming thought to me. Thank you. And then sign it this way, ladies. Listen to me, with all my respect. Do not put the word love there. With all my respect. And then, P.S., the one who still admires you. Now, he will not throw that card away. He will not throw that card away. And this is the power of this. We also have what we call a respect test. Come into the home tonight where he's just seated, relaxed, and come up to him and say, I was thinking about you today, all the things about you I respect, and I want you to know I respect you. Then exit the room. And what's going to happen? Well, He'll follow me, that's right. Or if he's lazy, he'll call you back. Hey, wait, come back, come back.
Tell me more.
Tell me more. But we encourage women to do this and find out, because the Word of God is teaching this, but your experience will confirm this. Now, we know you don't feel respect when he fails to be as loving as you are naturally. So right from the get-go, we love less naturally than you, and so we hurt you. We don't intend to hurt you. But I always say to women, how many of you have sons? And they hold up their hand. That mantra that I sang before, you know, I don't feel any respect for him, he's not superior, I'm not inferior, that whole, he hasn't earned it, he doesn't deserve it, we're returning to patriarchy, I'm not going to fear his dominance, I'm not going to subject myself to emotional abuse or be a doormat. Those attitudes are going to be the attitudes that precious daughter-in-law has toward your baby boy. And if we don't change the way we're doing it, he's just going to shut down, and then he's going to be labeled as unloving. And so what we have to do is rethink this. We know this idea of respect is foreign, completely foreign. Women say, I have no idea what you're even talking about. But just trust me, do that respect card, do the respect test. And if you do the respect test, make sure you have something authentic to say. I've had women write me and say, they'd come in and say, I was thinking about it today, all the things about you I respect, and I want you to know I respect you. He goes, wow, what? Well, that worked, she said. What worked? Well, this guy told me if I told you that I respected you. So one of the things we point out, women say men don't get it, women don't get it. We don't get it about love, women don't get it about respect.
Boy, it's big. I'm telling you.
It's huge.
I think here's the message this morning. We're all going to go through periods of disaffection in our relationship, times when we don't feel close. What's scary is we can subtly, even very unintentionally, get caught up in sort of a spin. A crazy cycle, Emerson, like you were talking about. And these negative patterns, ways we talk to each other, begin to take us further and further into this downward spinner cycle. And the tragedy is we wind up hating each other when we just disconnected. Maybe in the name of love, we begin to lose love in our relationship. And God forbid that. There's no doubt in my mind there are a lot of people listening right now who are saying, you know what? Been there. A lot of guys, a lot of gals listening to saying, I never thought about that. Love and respect. Emerson Eggerichs, if you don't have the book, you need to get the book. I mean, it's everywhere.
That I highly recommend that book. And I have it in my book, I have a link to that, and you can go on the website and see that. And the reason we took the time, that I wanted to take the time for us to watch that together, because it was probably unlikely that you would have watched it at home before it came, and I needed to stress and understand and point out that biblical design, because we're going to do a little experiment right now. We're going to look at something together. We're going to go through segments of something that was done in 1989. And I've watched this conservatively over 100 times. Every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. I've done it with families for many, many years, and I've seen it have a profound effect in a practical way of understanding why it's difficult to have that happen, the love and respect, and why we have the unhealthy conflict. Because we don't understand the design, because through not understanding the design, we get in these patterns of not understanding, like he was saying, each other. The husbands and the wives not understanding each other. And so we develop these negative ways of looking at each other, this adversarial atmosphere. And it doesn't mean we don't love each other. We do. That's what makes it all the more confusing, right? Because you love each other, you want to do right, you don't want to hurt each other, but we have these deep hurts as a result of it. So we're going to watch this, and what this was it's to teach educators. Now get this, because this is going to sound strange, but you're going to see we're going to do this experiment with them by proxy. He was teaching educators how to teach learning disabled children. And it's a thing called FAT City. It stands for frustration, anxiety, and we want to have this love and respect be synonymous with authority and submission. And that's not going to happen if you don't understand this design. So watch the introduction to this, and then I'll explain to you why we're going to do this together.
My name is Richard Lavoie, and I'm the director of the Eagle Hill School Outreach Program based in Greenwich, Connecticut. In a few moments, we're going to fill this room with an audience of people who will have the opportunity to experience what it's like to actually be a learning disabled child. 6 to 10% of the children in the United States today suffer from learning disabilities. This translates to hundreds of thousands of children and hundreds of thousands of families that are affected by this disability. In order to understand learning disabilities and what the child goes through, we of course must first understand what the term means. And when we talk about learning disabled children, we don't talk about what the child is, but we talk rather about what he is not. It's a definition of exclusion. In other words, give me 5 children that aren't functioning in the classroom. Take away the child who's mentally impaired or mentally retarded in some way. Take away the child who has a primary emotional disturbance. Take away the child who's not had the opportunity to learn. And take away the child who has some modality deficit, who perhaps is deaf or blind. The child that remains is a learning disabled child. That is, the child is not functioning in school, and yet his modalities are intact. He's had the opportunity to learn. He's not disturbed, and he's not retarded. One of the most common misconceptions about learning disabilities is that it's a school problem, when in actuality it affects every waking moment of the child's day. For that reason, we've called together a group of people today that view the child through very, very different eyes. We have a social worker, a psychologist, a recreational therapist, a regular education teacher, special education teachers, and most importantly, parents, teachers, and friends of learning disabled children. And those people will have the opportunity to walk for a mile in the shoes of the learning disabled child and see firsthand the frustration, anxiety, and tension that those children experience in school every day.
Now, think about what he said, and you'll understand why we're going to do this together, because we're going to become a part of that. You are going to actually experience everything that they're experiencing. Now, when he talked about learning disability, you understand that it's only a disability in context, right? So disability is a matter of context. What do I mean by that? You know, last month we looked at a video that was called War on Boys. Do you remember that? And it was talking about how in the school classrooms boys are treated differently. And you know that boys are diagnosed with ADHD at an alarming higher rate than our women, the female. Now in the classroom, it's very disruptive. What are they talking about? They're out of their seat all the time. They're always in everybody else's business. They're always distracted and all those things, right? And so it's a problem, and so it's considered to be a disability. Take that same boy in the classroom, that's a disability, and put him to work on the farm. Now it's no longer a disability, is it? In fact, now that's a big help for him to be that way working on the farm. So you see what I mean by it's all context? So when we look at, in fact, I wish they didn't call it learning disabled. I wish they call it learning different. It's a different way of processing, and the different way of processing when placed into a school classroom, that there's only one way to process, it becomes a disability. Now, think about what we've talked about up until this point in the way that male and female brains and our experiences and all those things have different personalities, all the different ways to make us process differently. So as we're watching this and being a part of this experiment, I want you to replace learning disabled with your spouse. Okay? I want you to think about when he's talking about how do you then help these learning disabled children, or come to understand how they process or experience the way that they process. And I want you to say, I'm going to experience how to process the way that my spouse does that's different than me. Because we all process differently, right? Does that make sense? So we're going to watch this together in segments, and something we won't get through all. We're going to do some parts of it, and then I'll be posting this where you can watch the whole thing. Like I said, I've watched it many times. You're going to want to keep this. It's going to help you understand your children. It's going to help you understand even relationships with your boss or with your employees, or like I said, with pastor and congregation. All different relationships, you realize that because we process differently, if you don't understand that, it creates these conflicts and it becomes a disability. So let's watch this together and experience.
First of all, this is not a role-playing activity. It's what's called simulation. Now, if you don't want to participate in this, If you would prefer to sit this out and you don't want to be called on, if you don't like being embarrassed in front of people and being asked to do things you can't do and being made to feel really uncomfortable, okay? That's tough. Because one of the things that you've got to gain as a parent or a teacher dealing with learning disabled people is this, the idea of problem ownership. You see, the learning disabled child isn't learning disabled just so he can mess up your English class, 8th period every day. He's not learning disabled just to complicate your lifestyle at home. He has no choice. So, we want everyone to participate. The first rule. The second rule is please no role playing. We don't want you to try to act like kids. The material will make it difficult for you to function. There is no need for you to try to make it worse than it really is, okay? And I am going to have the bias that many mainstream teachers have, which is that LD means lazy and dumb. And if you just push the kids and motivate them enough, they can learn. It's that they choose not to. Again, please just follow along with me. Don't take anything personally. We'll have a good time doing this thing. Nobody's going to get hurt, but you will get a chance to see what it's like to be a learning disabled child.
Now, does it make sense now? Yep. You're going to experience that with them as we watch it together in these segments. You're going to experience what it's different, like to process differently than you normally do, right? And so instead of saying that the learning disabled child isn't that way just to disrupt your classroom, think about your spouse and some of the ways that they do, and sometimes you think is irrational or you think is arrogant or those kinds of things, and experience what it's like. Let's watch the first one. Does that sometimes
What color is the booklet, Carol? What's it say in the front of the booklet, Kit? What's it stand for, Carolyn? What does it stand for, Carolyn?
I don't know.
What is it? It says at the bottom of the book. What's it stand for, Maria?
Frustration, anxiety, and tension.
Frustration, anxiety, and tension. What kind of animal's top of the page, Cara? Turn to the next page. What color's the first page, Jane?
Blue.
What does it say in the first page, Carol? The first page, Carol. Earth to Carol, come in, please. The first page. Earth to Carol, come in, please. Raise your hand if you thought that was funny. Yeah, everybody likes that except who? Except Carol. Anytime you as a teacher or a parent decide to use sarcasm with kids, understand that you created a victim. Now that little throwaway line that I threw at Carol, I will forget within 5 minutes, you will forget within 5 minutes, but it's very likely to stay with Carol for the rest of the day. Those little throwaway sarcasms we use. Jody, what color's the print in the first page?
Left.
What does it say, Lee?
Activity 1.
Is that what it says, Stephanie?
Yes.
Turn to the next page. What color's the next page, Lee?
Yellow.
What kind of animal is top of that page, Jody?
Tiger.
That's not a tiger. Carol, what kind of animal is top of that page?
It's a cat.
It's a cat. Famous story with a catnip, Maria. Famous story with a catnip. Famous story with a catnip, Maria. Famous story with a catnip. Give me one famous story with a catnip, Maria. Okay, does anxiety affect performance? Does anxiety affect performance? Of course it does. According to this, Maria doesn't know one story with a catnip. Give Maria a call tomorrow, she'll give you 30 of them. But in this situation, with the anxiety we've created already, with the anxiety that we've created in a short period of time, Maria's unable to get that information out. Famous story with the catnip, Carolyn.
3 little kittens.
Famous story with the catnip, Debbie.
Garfield.
Famous story with the catnip, Car.
Incredible Journey.
Famous story with the catnip, Kelly. Melissa. Karen. Kim. Merritt. Okay, let's take a look at what's happened now. I accepted the answer, I don't know, from Kelly. What were the next 4 answers that I got in a row? I don't know. See, we have to really put this under a microscope and look at this. You people have been learning disabled now for 6 minutes, and many of you have quit. Not 6 years, not 16 years, the way the LD child lives, but 6 minutes. And many of you, once I began accepting the answer, I don't know, how many of you decided if he calls on me, I'm going to say I don't know? Raise your hands. Yeah. Many of you have decided if he's going to accept I don't know as an answer, I'm going to stop trying to think of a response and I'll just say I don't know. Okay, Jody, what kind of animal is that? Top of the page again?
Cat.
Down below, what kind of animal is that, Lee?
Duck.
Stephanie, what kind of noise did a duck make?
Quack.
Famous story with the duck in it, Nancy? Famous story with the duck in it, Karen? You were ready for me, weren't you, Nancy? Famous story with the duck in it, Karen? Famous story with the duck in it, come on. Famous story with the duck in it. One famous story with a duck in it, Karen.
I can't think
famous
of a
story with
story.
a duck in it. It doesn't take a lot of thought, Karen. Famous story with a duck in it. One famous story with a duck in it. Nancy knew one.
Yeah, well, Nancy's better than I am because I can't think of a
Debbie,
story
famous
with
story
a
with a
duck.
duck in it. Famous story with famous story with a duck in a car.
Make way for duck.
Famous story with a duck in it, Kelly.
I was going to say Donald Duck.
Oh, she took my answer. Don't you love it? Melissa, famous story with a duck in it. Turn the page. Karen, what kind of animal is that? Top of the page. I'm sorry? A pig. What kind of noise did a pig make, Kim? Famous story with the pig in it, Merritt. Famous story with the pig in it, Merritt. Famous story with the pig in it, Paula. Down below, what kind of animal is that, Car?
Swan.
What kind of noise did it make, Debbie? Okay, see, what you've got to see sometime is you've got to see Fat City from where I'm standing. Because I've got 15 people looking up at me, and I say, what kind of noise does a swan make? And everybody takes a sudden interest in their shoes. They look down at they're both on there. In other words, what happens is, after 9 minutes of a learning disability, you people have already bought into one of the credos that controls the life of the LD child, which is this. If I can't see the teacher can't see me. And so what you do is you look away, because we all know that it is the human reaction to anxiety. The first human reaction to anxiety is to look away from the source of the anxiety. And yet, what's the first thing we say to kids when we yell at them? You look at me while I'm yelling at you. You look at me while I'm spoiling your life. There are so many things we do as parents and teachers that don't make any sense. How many people here insist that kids look at them when we yell at them? I do all the time, and it makes absolutely no sense, and it's contrary to everything we know about the human reaction to anxiety. Okay?
Okay, now it's going to start making more and more sense. You watch this, and you're going to start to experience this. But think about it. I know wives can relate. Does sometimes the way he's doing that as a teacher sound like sometimes the way husbands are with their wives? In trying to logically get them to, like you say, like if the wife's saying, well, you know, you always do this. That's another word that we have different. Always and never, right? Different, male and female that are different in those words. And so when she says, well, you do this all the time, and he goes, well, tell me one time I did that, right? And what happened? Well, I can't think of any right now. Well, see, it must not be true. See, start watching this in the context of thinking how we are with each other, and that's what I'm saying. It's we all basically are not learning disabled, but difference in process. Oh. So watch this processing.
Turn the page, top of the page, Karen, what kind of animal is that?
Oh, a horse.
What kind of noise did it make, Debbie?
Nay.
Famous story with a horse in a car.
Black stallion.
Famous story with a horse in it, Kelly.
Black beauty.
Melissa, famous story with a horse in it.
They did both.
They took both my answers. Karen, famous story with a horse in it. Kim, famous story with a horse in it. Come on. Famous story with a horse in it. Merritt.
Black beauty.
What kind of animals down below, bottom of the page, Kelly?
Camel.
Okay, just keep the books right where they are. Let's talk for a second. What about the pace of the class? Too what? Too what? Too fast. Okay, now this is important to understand as a mainstream teacher particularly. Learning disabled kids have a difficult time processing the language. As a result of that, if I ask a group, a mainstream classroom, 4th grade class with some learning disabled children and some non-disabled children, and I say, would you please tell me who was the first president of the United States? The non-LD children are processing an answer. The learning disabled children have to process what? The question. So in effect, they have twice the processing load to do than the other students in the class. So even if the class is moving at a normal rate, to the LD child, it seems to be moving at this breakneck speed as we've been talking here. So you say, who was the first president of the United States? The non-LD kids are processing an answer. The LD kids have to process the question. They actually have to go, okay, let's see who. It means it's going to be a person. Was means he's probably dead. First, the one at the beginning. President is probably the one in Washington of the United States. President of the United States. Okay, who's the first president of the United States? Oh, I know that. He raises his hand. Everybody else has gone to recess. Because he had twice the processing load to do. Lee is my non-LD child. Stephanie is my LD child. And I say, Lee, could you please tell us the name of the book we're reading today? And she says, Huckleberry Finn. And I say, Stephanie, could you please tell us who wrote that book? And she says what? Huckleberry Finn. How many times has that happened to you in the classroom? Why? Because what happens is Stephanie is so busy processing the first question that she misses the fact that Lee responded to it, misses the fact that I asked the second question, and responds to the last question that she processed. But of course, what happens in a typical classroom? What's the name of the book we're reading, Lee? Huckleberry Finn. Good. And Stephanie, who wrote it? And she says Huckleberry Finn. The whole class laughs, and we say, Stephanie, leave the room. You've disrupted my class for the last time. Now, that teacher would not punish Stephanie for being unable to read or unable to do math because she understands a learning disability. And yet the child will be punished for having a processing difficulty, and all of those problems are caused by the same thing, which is this inability to process language. So as a teacher, what do you do about that? There are some techniques you can use. Let me show you one very quickly. Stephanie's the LD child in the classroom. What I do is I take Stephanie aside sometime when no one else is around. Just Stephanie and myself. And I sit down and I say, Stephanie, you're having trouble with my lectures, aren't you? Yes, I am, Mr. LaVoy. You talk so fast. Well, as a matter of fact, Stephanie, I don't talk too fast, but it seems that way to you. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a little deal. Because I'm sure not only is it difficult for you to process, but you're also nervous that I'm going to call on you. Yeah, I'm so nervous you're going to call on me that I lose track of what you're saying and it makes it worse. Here's the deal we're going to make, Stephanie. I will never call on you unless I'm standing in front of your seat. So while I'm over here lecturing, you take all of your energy and you put it into concentrating on the lecture and understanding and processing the lecture, and don't worry, I won't call on you. So the next day I come into class and I'm standing over here and we're talking about the War of 1812 and I'm throwing questions at Maria and at Kit and at Jody and at Kara, and then I look over at Stephanie and I kind of move over in front of her desk and I say, and Stephanie, maybe you could tell us who the president was during the War of 1812. And she answers the question, I say thank you and move away. No one else knows that that went on. And of course what I do is I ask her questions I know she can answer, and eventually I'll be over here lecturing and you begin to see her hand goes up because now she understands that she can survive this experience called volunteering in school. The most common misconceptions about learning disabled children is this. He's very distractible. He has no attention span at all. Using the terms distractible and attention span interchangeably, when actually those are two completely different children. You see, the child with no attention span pays attention to nothing. The child who's distractible pays attention to everything. The learning disabled child is distractible. In other words, he can't focus anything out. So he might be sitting there listening to me talk, and he's interested in what I'm saying, but he's equally interested in my shoes, in my watch, in the fact that his shoes are too tight, in the picture of the Indian behind me. He can't focus anything out. Everything gets his attention. And the same thing happens with oral language. They can't focus that kind of thing out because of the processing deficit. Imagine going to school every day where things seem to be going as fast as we've been going now. No wonder they come up with those strange stomach aches before they go to school in the morning.
And here's the relational translation. Okay? And I highly relate to that last part of that. But think about this. Imagine, because see what he did was he became an ally of that student, right? And did things to help them to succeed. Imagine if every family had coaching when they got married, and every father took the responsibility, every husband took the responsibility to learn their family's personality, the way they process, and then developed as allies the means to communicate, the means to raise their family in a way that becomes allies to help them to succeed. And it takes their strengths and maximizes their strengths and makes their weaknesses irrelevant. You see how that works? We have a thing we do here at the gate, and many churches do this, where in our 301 class that I just went to just this last weekend, we talk about the shape. It's your spiritual gifts, your heart, your personality type, your experiences, and your abilities, right? It's an acrostic for these things. It's your shape. It's who you are, how you function. Could you imagine if every husband took the responsibility I believe God's given them, and learns the shape of each of their family members and the shape of their family, and then structures the way their family operates according to that shape? That's becoming allies. That's why this is so important and why we're looking at this. Because that, through love and respect, that's what we do. Okay? And then we can succeed. And you see what happens when we don't do that. The failure that happens. Now, it's going to start getting really real. You're going to experience this together.
Okay, bottom of the page again. Don't turn the page. Bottom of the page. What kind of animal is that, Jody?
Camel.
Lee, if I want to see a camel, where can I go?
To a desert.
Where's a good desert? Stephanie, where's a big desert? What country?
The Sahara.
Quickly, another one. Nancy, what country? What country is the Sahara in, Nancy?
Africa.
Good guess, Karen.
Egypt.
If I want to see a camel, where can I go?
Egypt.
A famous story with a camel in it, Debbie. Todd, do you know a famous story with a camel in it?
Kipling's Just So story.
Kelly, famous story with a camel in it.
The Arabian Nights?
Melissa, famous story with a camel in it.
I don't know.
Okay, don't turn the page yet. Who wants to volunteer for the next one? Let's take a look. Not one volunteer. Why? There's two reasons why you won't volunteer in this particular exercise. Let me explain to you what they are. First of all, you've been learning disabled now for the last 10 minutes or so. Learning disabled people do not like surprises. They don't like dealing with something if they don't know what's coming up. You don't know what's coming up, so you're not going to volunteer. But that's not the real reason you're not volunteering. The real reason you're not volunteering is this. And think about this. What did I say to you when you got an answer right? What did I say? Nothing. No reinforcement, no recognition, no reward. I never told anyone it was a good answer. I never responded positively to one response that I got. What did I say when you couldn't get an answer, when you couldn't think of something or you made a mistake? What did I say then? I had plenty to say then, didn't I? You see, what you've learned in 10 minutes is what the learning disabled child has learned in his school history, and that is this. You're sitting there thinking, why should I play with this guy? Why should I play this game? Because based on what I've seen, if I get the answer right, he's not going to say anything. And if I get it wrong, he's going to embarrass me. So why should I volunteer? You see, what I've done is knocked all of the risk-taking out of you. When we deal with learning disabled adults, we find their most common problem is they won't take chances. Because all of the risk-taking was knocked out of them in their early years. Because you've learned that if you get the answer correct, I'm not going to give you any reinforcement. You're thinking, what's the best that can happen? The best that can happen here is that I get the answer correct and he won't say anything. But the worst that can happen is I get it wrong and he's going to embarrass me. So I'm just going to sit here. I'll respond if he calls on me, but there's no way I'm going to volunteer.
Relational translation. Think about this. I hear this from husbands and wives all the time. Men will tell me, no, I've tried all that. It doesn't work because no matter how much I get it right, the one time I get it wrong, I'm in trouble, right? I can never do it. I'm always in trouble. And that goes back to, we'll talk later about that debt account. When you see the video on that relational debt account. You feel like you can never pay it off, right? So no matter what you do, and then I hear wives telling me all the time, you know, why bother trying to go to him and appeal to him with respect because it never works. He's always going to tell me how I'm wrong. He's always going to put it that way, so why should I, right? And so relationally, because we don't understand how this works, we do the same thing. We're not going to take risks in the relationship of healthy conflict that's supposed to help each other grow, right? Because it's too painful in that way, okay? Now, watch what starts to happen in a practical way of the way that we process. This is phenomenal.
Okay, open the next page, go. Raise your hand if you can tell me what's on this page.
You know what it is, don't say it, but anybody can tell what it is?
Let's look at your own books. Look at your own book, please. You know what that is, Elaine? Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you know what it is? Yes or no? Just yes or no answer. Do you know what that is, Tom? Yes or no? Yes. You know what that is, Carol? Yes or no? Do you know what that is, Stephanie? Yes or no?
Yes.
You know what that is, Karen? Yes or no? Yes or no, Karen?
No.
Debbie, do you know what that is? Yes or no? Okay? Let's work with Debbie here, okay? Let me show you what happens with the learning disabled child in the classroom when he's unable to perceive. There's basically 4 things the teacher does when the child cannot perceive something. Here's the first thing that teachers do. Each one is a little bit sillier than the one in front of it. Here's the first thing that teachers do. Debbie, tell me what that is. Debbie, look at it.
A rock.
Debbie, look at it. Here it comes. Debbie, look at it harder. See, I don't know what that means. I've heard teachers for years tell kids to look at something harder. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what that means. I mean, I can push harder or pull harder, but I can't look at something harder. So the first thing we do is we tell them to look at it harder. That doesn't work. We do this. Debbie, put the book. You don't have to turn the book around. Second thing we do is we say we're going to give them something. Debbie, would you please tell me what that is? Tell me what that is, and you can be first in line for recess. Did that help?
No.
Why do we do that? Why do we do that as teachers? The child can't do something, so we automatically promise him something if he can. That would be like if I took my child to the hospital with a temperature of 105 degrees, and I went to the doctor and I said, "Doctor, my child's got a temperature of 105 degrees." And the doctor said, "Here, I tell you what, here, I'll give you this $1. I'll give you this $1 if you can get it down to 102, son." How would that be? You would expect the doctor to give some sort of medicine. You wouldn't expect a doctor to try to bribe the child out of his temperature, and yet that's what we do with kids. We try to bribe them by giving them things. Did that help, Debbie?
It's a man.
No. Okay. All right. Okay.
It's got a coat
Okay.
on.
All right. We do three things. We basically do. Now, the third thing we do is we begin taking things away. We begin taking things away from the child. Tell me what that is, or you can't go to recess. Tell me what that is, or I'll send a note home to your mother. Tell me what that is, or I'll drop you down a reading group. When that doesn't work, we go into our fourth mode, which is something that I find very distressing as a personality trait that many, many teachers have, and that is we do what's called blaming the victim. What we do is we blame Debbie. We say the reason Debbie can't tell me what this is she's not what? Trying hard enough. You see, what that reflects is what we call blaming the victim. That reflects blaming the victim. What we say is the reason the child can't tell me what this is that the child is not motivated. It's a motivational problem. Because we all know that the answer to learning disabilities is motivation, right? The key to overcoming learning disabilities is motivation, correct? Wrong. Wrong. Motivation is one of the most misunderstood concepts in education today. Motivation only enables us to do, to the best of our ability, what we are already capable of doing. Let's try it a little bit more. Debbie, can you tell me what this is now? Yes or no? Yes or no, Debbie?
No, I don't know what that thing is.
Okay, here we go, Debbie. I've got a check, blank check for $100. I will sign this over to you if you can tell me what this is in 5 seconds.
My husband's going to kill me.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 more seconds for $100. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Was Debbie motivated? Was Debbie motivated? Could she do it? No. Because you see, learning disabilities has very little to do with motivation. What it really has to do with is perception. Perception. You see, you can all see this picture, but you can't perceive it. Here's what I'm going to do. I am now going to give you some direct instruction. Once I tell you what this is, about half of you will automatically get it, and you won't understand why you couldn't see it in the first place. The rest of you will need a little extra help, and that's okay too. There'll also be some of you who will say, oh yeah, I know what that is, but you really don't. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. Try, you really want to, once you see it, it's like turning on a light in a dark room. But this is a classic picture that illustrates the difference between vision and perception. You can all see it, but you can't bring meaning to it until I teach you what it is. And this activity is done to demonstrate that what the LD child needs is a teacher. He needs a teacher, not necessarily all kinds of commercial software. What he needs is a teacher to give him this direct instruction, because once I give you this direct instruction, you will be able to see this perfectly clearly. What you have in front of you is a photograph, a poor quality photograph, but the photograph of the face of a cow. The cow's looking directly in your face. Raise your hand if you cannot see it. I'll come around and show it to you. Raise your hand if you can't see it. Face of a cow.
Oh my God.
All right. All right. Anybody over here not see it? Anybody not see it? Nancy? Face of a cow. Okay, all right. Over here, anybody not see it? Tom, can you see it? Let me do Carol. Carolyn? It's the face of a cow. Okay, all right. Elaine? Face of a cow. Okay, anybody back here? Susan, Ann, Rita? Huh? Anybody not see it yet? Does anyone not see it? Okay, everyone, please look at your picture. What do you have in front of you? It's a cow. It always was a cow. I didn't change it. I didn't change the stimulus. All I did is give you direct instruction. And yet what we do with learning disabled kids is we expect them to go in a corner and teach themselves. Or we assign them to the nearest intern or teacher aide or volunteer grandmother that we have. What they need is trained, experienced teachers. Once I taught you what this was, you had a little difficulty perceiving it. But you see, this doesn't really capture the experience of the LD child for this reason. No one in this room could do this. The real experience of learning disabilities is being the only person who can't do it. The other kids open up their books and they get to work, and the poor LD child sits there and thinks, what's everybody doing? I don't understand what this is. I can't understand this. Well, how can everybody get to work right away? See, that's the real experience of being learning disabled, is being the only one who can't do it.
Now, the relational translation, and think about this. By the way, I understand this is a secular thing, but every bit of this has real biblical principles and scriptures that go behind it, right? And that's why I wanted you to see the values and the biblical design, and why we talked about that love and respect, so that we could look at that in that context. But think about it. For example, the Bible tells fathers, don't exacerbate your children, right? And what we do in that. But think about this, and I have to embarrass you, because this is how early on in our relationship, and why I said if we had coaching that would help us to understand this stuff early on so that we could get this. Because of this perception of things and how we see things differently, and if we don't understand that. So early in our relationship, sometimes my wife would be hurt by something I would do, and so she'd get quiet, and I wouldn't know what I did wrong, right? Like we've seen in here. And I would ask her what's wrong, and she would tell me there's nothing wrong, but there obviously was something wrong. But she was deeply hurt. She didn't know how to explain it to me, and she had a million times. But so for several days, she wouldn't be talking to me, and I didn't know what to do, and I kept asking her, what did I do wrong? And finally, I would just be frustrated, and I would say, please, you've got to tell me what I did wrong. She says, I've told you 100 times, you don't listen. And I said, well, you've got to tell me again. I don't know what I did wrong. So she'd walk in the kitchen, she said, that. And I would follow in there and go, what? She goes, that. I said, what? She said, you can't see that. I said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Please tell me. She said, how many times have I asked you, please close the cabinet door after you get something out of the cupboard? And as soon as she would say it, I go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed that again. Now, for her, that was deeply hurtful and painful. Why? Because for her, at that time, she was thinking the only possible explanation for me not doing that is I simply didn't care. Right? So it was very hurtful and painful to her. But see, it had nothing to do with motivation for me. I literally didn't see it. But you know what happened? Just like what he was teaching them, she became my ally as we began to learn and grow together. And so she realized how much energy did it take for her to be hurt and angry for several days, and then finally do it. But how much energy did it take for her to just say, turn around, go back, close that cabinet door? But she, early on, would think, but I'm not your mother, I'm your wife. But wait a minute, she's my ally. So she began to just would tell me every time, just go close that, go close that, go close that. I'll never forget a few years ago, because it's training the subconscious brain. A few years ago, I heard her laughing out loud from the other room, and she came walk in, and I said, what are you laughing at? She goes, did you just hear yourself? Apparently what I'd said is, my son Jonathan, I said, Jonathan, can you not close a cabinet door when you get something out of the cupboard? And I realized I had come that far. Why? Because she became my ally that helped me when she would tell me, and then it began to program my subconscious brain. I called her up. She has these sister weekends where she goes with her sisters for the weekend. She has 7 sisters, and they go once a quarter. And see, I don't believe in making the bed. I think it's stupid. Why make the bed? You can sleep in the next night. But see, that's something very, very important to her. And so I just couldn't do it, and I would never remember or think about it. But she, as an ally, began to teach me and train me. So I'll never forget the first time this happened, where she was gone for the weekend, and I realized what I'd done. I called her up. I said, "You've ruined me." And she said, "What?" And I said, "You're not even here, and I made the bed." See, the difference is when you become allies, why it's important to get this. We're only going to have time for one more of these, and again, you'll get an opportunity. I'll send you the link. You can watch this whole thing. And because I want you to get this and compare it to the biblical principles and the values and those things in the vows, when you look at that you can do that together. And I want you to work on this all throughout the rest of this month, right? So let's watch this one, because this is extremely profound and a negative effect.
Do we think the visual perception problem is going to affect behavior? Do you think so? Okay, let's try this on for size. You're a mom or a dad. Your son in the 4th grade comes home and says, "Ma, they told me I can't take the school bus again until I'm voting age, but I didn't do anything wrong." What do we automatically assume? Automatically. Of course you did something wrong. You must have done something wrong. You don't get thrown off a school bus for doing nothing wrong. You must have done something wrong. Let's take a look at that. Because many times the learning disabled child, certainly not all the time, but many times the LD child will get into trouble and not know what he did wrong. And when he says, I don't know what I did wrong, he's being honest. We're going to give that activity a shot right now. Here's what we're going to do. I brought in a picture today, and I'm going to show everybody this picture. And all I want everyone to do is to write a nice title for the picture. There's your picture. All right? Everyone, a good title for that picture, please. Something I'm going to like. No talking, just come up with a good title for the picture. Maria, you like your answer?
Yes.
Carol, do you like yours? Stephanie, do you like yours? Is this good enough for me to read in front of the class? Okay. Stephanie gave me an answer that she says is not only good, but it's good enough for me to read in front of the class, okay? Were you trying to be funny here, Stephanie? No. Excuse me, class. Do you think this is funny? Did you write this to be funny? Would you like to see how funny I think this is, Stephanie? You know, I can think of nothing that a kid can write on a piece of paper that gives a teacher the right to tear it up in front of them. And yet it happens in schools all the time. And when I'm consulting at a school and they tell me there's a teacher who tears papers up in front of them, I say this to the teacher. I say to the teacher, suppose you passed in your contracts to your grades, your grade report cards at the end of the year to your principal, your final reports. And you handed them to your principal, and the principal took them and he looked at it and he said, nah, this isn't what I had in mind, and he tore them up in front of you. I've never met a teacher that would tolerate that, yet we feel very comfortable doing it with kids. But let's get back to Stephanie, because Stephanie not only gave me an answer that was fresh, but then made it worse by telling me that it was good enough to read in front of the class. Well, you're not going to think it's very funny when you stay in for recess for a week, Stephanie, and when your mother comes in for a conference. And you know what she's going to say, class? You know what she's going to say? I got in trouble with Mr. Lavoie today, but I didn't do anything wrong, because that's what she always says. You want to know what fresh answer Stephanie gave me and then embarrassed me by telling me it was good enough to read in front of the class? Death stalker. Death stalker. Here, I take the time, now take a look at it. I take the time to bring in a beautiful picture of a woman looking at herself in the mirror. Take a look at it. Okay? See it, Stephanie? You see it? The back of her head, she's seeing her reflection in the mirror. Okay? Okay? Many times, not all the time, but many times a learning disabled child will get in trouble and will literally not know what he or she did wrong. The coach will say, everybody get in the left-hand side of the gym. Our kid stands on the right-hand side of the gym, and the coach says, that's it, you can't play. The child says, but I didn't do anything wrong. Because to his perception, he didn't. See, what happened is you responded to what you perceived. You misperceived the stimulus. Based on Stephanie's perception of this stimulus, that was a very good answer. But see, I wear the suit. I'm the teacher. And I determine what the stimulus is. And this is not a picture of a skull. There's no skull in this picture. It's not a matter of debate. This is not a skull. It's a picture of a woman looking at herself in a mirror. It's a classic picture called vanity. So I was expecting answers like the big night out or getting ready for the prom or something like that. I certainly wasn't expecting something like death stalker. Okay? But again, what you did is you reacted to the stimulus that you perceived, and then, if you could have seen the look on Stephanie's face, she was thinking, what is he so upset about? What did I do wrong?
Here's the thing, and I hope you get the point of this, and especially for the men, for manhood that matters. See, I hate the word fault, because when somebody tells something is your fault, it's easy to defend yourself, right? You can say all the reasons why it's not my fault, or if it is my fault, it's not my fault that it's my fault, right? I can come up with extenuating circumstances why, even though it's my fault, it's not my fault. And we do that all the time. What is the reason why the role of husband has 100% of the authority in the relationship? Anybody know? What is the reason it has 100% of the authority? Because he has 100% of the responsibility. It's not about fault, it's about responsibility. See, you can deny fault, you can explain away fault, but you can't explain away responsibility, right? Because no matter whose fault it is, it still comes down to my responsibility. So husbands, men, I'm pleading with you. It's your responsibility to find out, to learn, to know your family, and to lead them in a way that you can operate in love and respect instead of being adversarial, that we learn to become allies, and you can lead in that. Now, I didn't know how to do this for most of our marriage. And it's taken a long time for me to try to turn that around. And that's why, again, I highly recommend that you go on that Love and Respect website and look at all those things. And I've got it linked, and you'll see all these things. And we didn't get time to go through, but in the binders, this is where you're going to be looking at these things and stuff like this that you can pass down generation to generation. Learn your family's shape. Do personality profiles. Understand how we see differently. My wife and I are as opposite as you could be in personality types. But you know what? It works together good, and it has to do with identifying your strengths and your weaknesses, and then working together as allies to maximize your strengths and make your weaknesses irrelevant. See, in an adversarial world, we're constantly feel like we're in trouble all the time when we have that relational debt account, and so we're always trying to get out of that debt. And we're trying to fix our weaknesses, right? We know that's what's got us in trouble, so we're always trying to work on that. What happens when you spend all your energies trying to fix your weaknesses? Do they get better? No, why? Because it's not about motivation, is it? And what also happens, not only do your weaknesses not get better, what happens to your strengths? They get starved, right? And so they begin to come down. But when you put your focus and energies on your strengths because you have an ally that helps to make your weaknesses irrelevant, then not only does your strengths come up, but so do your weaknesses. I shared this story with Pastor David this week. I love this story about Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War was putting all these different generals in charge of the army, but they kept losing, and they were highly qualified. They were doing all these things. And finally, he had a meeting of his advisor, and he says, look, I'm going to put General Grant in charge of the army. And I said, you can't do that. He said, why not? He says, because the man's a drunk. And Lincoln said, find out what he's drinking and send a case of it to all my other generals. All I know is he wins, right? And it's maximizing strengths. And I say this all the time when I do this exercise with families, and I have them to list out their strengths and weaknesses in themselves and their strengths and weaknesses of their spouse. And then we go through those, and I translate it for them so they can see what it's actually meaning. And then I look at them and I say, look, let's take your spouse's number one greatest strength that you've identified as the thing that you love the most in your spouse, that really blesses you that they're that way. And then their biggest weakness, the thing that hurts you the most in their behavior. And what if I said to you, look, I can guarantee you today, I can get rid of your spouse's biggest weakness, the thing that hurts you most. I can guarantee you I could get rid of that today. But in order to do that, I also have to get rid of that greatest strength, the thing you love the best about it. Would you want me to do it? And nearly every time they say, no, of course not. But you see, sometimes they come from the same place. They come from the same, it's the flip side of the same coin. And so as husbands, we need to lead so that we can understand that shape, so that we can maximize our strengths as allies and do that and operate in love and respect. Now, when I post the video of this session, I will do the complete thing. I'll go through the rest of it and we'll put it together. I've done that on several of the other sessions that we've done, but I'm going to be faithful to get us out on time like I promised that I would. But I want you to go through that and watch it together as a family. And you can watch this whole video together, the Fat City video, as a family, because there's several other exercises, and some of them are a lot of fun. They do, but it shows you how differently we process as male and female, as adult and children, and not only will it be a benefit to your marriage relationship, but I'm saying all your relationships can benefit. And again, the biblical principle, go and watch it. By the way, have you got a chance to go on the website and look at the principles gallery? And I'm going to start posting more on them, because those principle galleries are little 5 to 10 minute videos that are principles to help us bridge that gap between, what we know as God's design and where we actually are. And there's one in there talking about learning not to assess motive, but to respond to action rather than react to motive. Okay? I highly recommend that because it will talk a lot about the biblical side of what we looked at today. Okay? Lord, thank you that you designed us so perfectly to fit together in our relationships. And that it's through those relationships is the joints that supplies the parts of your body so that the body of Christ can function in the world. And when those relationships are not working right, then the body of Christ does not work right. And God, I believe that's the reason that you made it to be the family to be the model for the church and not the church to be the model for the family. Because as we watch the way the family is designed to operate and all these things we talked about, it's the same way that the body of Christ, the family of God, is to operate. So God, I pray for each person here and those that are watching on video that you would cause them to have the intentionality, the diligence to pursue these things deeper. This is just the 101 part of this. It's just really exposing them to these principles. But over time, and next year we'll go into it deeper, but just so that they could begin to become aware of how you design the universe to work. God, you know, I believe with all of my heart that the only living that matters is living by your design. We pray this, believing and trusting in the name of Jesus. Amen. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.